Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Brad Pitt travels to the cool world of Ad Astra. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Thomas Mariani, and I'm just, sitting here in my space station searching for the one true insight that all man searches for. The love of their father.
And I am Adam Thomas, and I'm actually in Ad Astra. I played Tommy Lee Jones's eyebrows.
Really good job.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I did my best.
Yes, but we're not the only ones here, Adam. We have another guest with us. He's a returning guest. He's been on previously. Directly from Cool World, Mr. Mel Glenn Gore. Mel, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Cool World. Can't recommend it.
What? No. It's
Go
like
to
a
Florida
vacation
instead.
destination for everybody. What are you talking about? But welcome back to the show, Mel, and we invited you on and gave you a list of topics you were doing, and you jumped on to this episode, which we're doing about Mr. Brad Pitt, in honor of Bullet Train coming out, finally, and we decided, we really want to devote an episode to this very big star, obviously, but what attracted you to him in particular as a topic to come back for?
First of all, thank you very much. I appreciate the invite to come back. Looking at everything on the list, you guys had some really cool ideas this time around, certainly. I shouldn't spoil them for anything coming up.
Our audience is just on pins and needles, just like, we can't find out. We have to have it surprised for us.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'll keep that under wraps. But there's some good stuff coming. I'll just say that. But Brad Pitt just has a really impressive body of work, and he has the luxury of being one of those guys that I hated, like when he first broke out on the scene, and also has the luxury of being one of those guys who just won me over. He put out like 3 stellar movies back to back, like right in the early to mid 90s. And I was just like, you know what? Respect for that guy.
Like, if you look back at, he's been making movies basically for about 30 years or so. He, started appearing in movies in the late 80s, but really started popping in the early 90s with, most would say, a Thelma and Louise was, the first time he kind of popped, where he plays, a himbo, dude that they pick up at a certain point. And I think, from what I at least am aware of with that time, a lot of people were kind of against him. But then again, I'm a bit younger, so I have more the perspective of, Brad Pitt just being everywhere. I remember Brad Pitt just being, this massive star who had already gotten the acclaim that he had gotten in the mid-90s or so. And I think I just love the fact that he's kind of spun that off in a way where, he's part of that group with, obviously, the Ocean series with, George Clooney and Matt Damon and him. I consider kind of the 3 Soderbergh boys who really popped with that movie in a different way. And what I like about Brad Pitt is he's kind of the middleman between those other two, because George Clooney's just otherworldly charming in a way where it's that dude you could never see yourself being around him. He's too big a movie star. And then Matt Damon is the really good looking dude who at the same time would have totally gone to your high school, but still would have kept going for them to become a movie star. Brad Pitt kind of has that weird comfortable middle ground where he is otherworldly, charming and handsome and everything, but at the same time you could see him talking to you and it wouldn't feel too out of the ordinary. He kind of has straddles that middle ground in a way that makes him a bit more approachable than most movie stars. At least I would argue. I don't know if anyone disagrees with that analysis.
Yeah, a guy married to Angelina Jolie, I don't think I could hang with him.
But he doesn't feel like he's too good for you, Mel. I think that's the thing. He doesn't have as inflated an ego.
I could probably hang with him when he was with Jennifer Aniston.
Maybe. Who knows? I don't know. Adam, what's your take on Pitt?
He's slowly turning into Robert Redford.
True.
No, I've always liked Brad Pitt, and I've always been a Brad Pitt fan. I mean, kind of always been at least post Thelma and Louise stuff. He was the hot actor, the good looking guy that's debonair. But the thing is, Brad Pitt has always really sort of backed it up. He's never turned in really shitty performances. He's done interesting performances, I'd say even more so than bad performances. And just as he's getting older and older, like I said, he's just getting better and better. I mean, for the fact that even though I might not have liked the movie so much, but like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and our good feature that we're talking about tonight came out the same year. And they're two just really strong performances. I mean, the guy's he's just grown into that where he's just the cool guy. He's, like I said, like Robert Redford. The only thing, it was funny, I was talking to my wife today, actually. It's like the real weird thing is in like 10 years, Brad Pitt will be like normal, should be playing grandfather age in films. And it's just, that's so hard to see.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel any younger.
Right. I mean, but the thing is also what I like about Pitt is even like outside of him being like his star persona, he takes chances on weird things. Like I would say the good pick we have is definitely like a weird choice that most stars wouldn't kind of take a chance at. But even like through his Plan B Entertainment production company, he's produced such a wide variety of interesting movies, even to the degree that like before he ever won an Oscar for acting, he won for producing Moonlight and stuff like The Last Black Man in San Francisco and stuff like that. He's a guy who also like really appreciates good film and wants to take chances on that, even if he's not in front of the screen. Even he'll produce a movie and have a small bit part just to get like some kind of financing, like 12 Years a Slave, where he shows up and he's just like, oh, hey, I'm building houses and I look like Jesus. Hi, everybody. I'm here in the last 10 minutes of the movie. Shit like that. He knows like his star cachet and he uses it to get weird, interesting films made that wouldn't get made in the normal Hollywood system.
Yeah, you find his name on some wild stuff, which I think is very, very cool. It wouldn't surprise me to find that like he was like an editor on the board of Cat Fancy magazine or something like that. Like he'll just show up anywhere.
Big cat guy. The hugest cat guy, Brad Pitt. Who knows? But we're talking about two very interesting films in his filmography today. If you don't know, basically, the premise of this show is at the end of every episode, Adam and I pick a good and a bad feature related to the topic in question. And we end up with, discussing the good or bad feature on the next episode. So for Brad Pitt, at the end of our last episode, we did random picking, and we got our bad pick, which we'll discuss first, Cool World from 1992, so very early in his career. And then we'll have my good pick, which is Ad Astra, which was much more recent in his career, so we're definitely going on both ends with it. But let's go ahead and start with Cool World.
During his 10 years in prison, Jack Deebs created his own world.
You're Jack Deebs, the creator of Cool World, right? I can't believe this.
Now he thinks he's going home to the real world. But he's wrong. Real wrong.
Welcome to my world.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
Freeze. Cool World Police. I'm a cartoonist. I drew all this.
This place exists with or without you.
I've been waiting for you, darling.
Noids do not have sex with doodles. It's the oldest law in Cool World.
Since it's only a dream, indulge your fantasies. I just want to be real.
This place should be erased.
Hey, it's a living.
Cool World.
We may not be real to you as yet, but we will be.
So Cool World came out July 10th, 1992, from director Ralph Bakshi, who we've talked about previously on the show ages ago. But if you're unaware, Ralph Bakshi was sort of like famous for being an underground animator who did a lot of interesting, more lascivious animation in the 70s, like Fritz the Cat. As he went along, he was doing like the Lord of the Rings animated adaptation that came out in like 78, other weird projects in between. This is his most recent feature film, because Cool World was kind of an infamous disaster when it came out. If you're unaware, it's extremely hard to do a plot synopsis of this movie, because this movie doesn't have much of a fucking plot. But very basically, it is about a world in which these cartoon characters known as doodles exist, and there's like dimensional travel that allows live action humans to come in. Our main sort of character is Gabriel Byrne, who's like this cartoonist who travels in and out of Cool World where all these doodles live, and particularly has a fancy for his own drawing creation, Hollywood, who is voiced by Kim Basinger. And amongst the residents of Cool World is a live-action police detective played by Brad Pitt, who had traveled over there after getting back from World War II in the 40s, and a big accident happens. The opening scene is him getting bizarrely abducted into Cool World. And this was a movie that pretty much came about because Roger Rabbit was such a huge hit, and Paramount was trying to kind of feed on that success that Disney and Amblin had with that particular movie. Ralph Bakshi originally wanted to make it more of like a horror movie about a human man having sex with a cartoon woman, resulting in a horrible, like, abomination child that would, like, try and go out into the real world and murder, basically. And then Paramount tried to turn that into a bit more of a, like, sellable movie midway through production, and there was a lot of twists and turns that made this movie, at least at the time, very much seem like a disaster. But I'm glad to tell all of you that it still is very much a fucking disaster of a movie. This is a fucking car wreck of a movie. It's great that it opens with that car wreck, because it sets you up perfectly for the complete ungodly mess that this is. Now, Mel, I know you have a bit of an animation background, right?
I do,
You
yes.
You dabble with animation to some degree. Does this, like, just hurt you internally?
Oh, externally too. Like, don't make no mistake. It hurts on every level that something can hurt. I mean, physical, mental, social. Like, yeah, it was. I regretted that I actually had to spend money to, like, rent this because it had been such a long time. But I needed to kind of refresh. I kept wondering, is this as bad as I remember? And honestly, it's worse because I was so young the first time I saw it. But yeah, like my mind is sharp, so I can really pick up everything wrong with it this time around.
Yeah, I remember I also watched this at a very young age because my dad was like, oh, it's like Roger Rabbit, whatever. It's like humans in live action. He had not seen this film, obviously. He's just like, sure, whatever, you can watch it. And I distinctly remember particularly the whole speech Brad Pitt has at one point establishing the rules of a human cannot have sex with a doodle. And I'm like 7. And I'm like, what does any of this mean? And I'm glad to know that I've aged into being a wiser adult who also is unsure of why this is happening at all. Like, it's one of those movies where I thought when I was a kid, like, oh, maybe I'll get when I get older. It's like, nope. Still doesn't make any fucking sense no matter how old you get, kid. Adam, this was your bad pick. And are you in agreement with our disastrous take on Cool World?
I mean, yeah, man. I saw this at a really young age, too. Because I remember the advertisements for it, at least like the one-page advertisements me on the back of comic books and all that stuff. So I was like, what is this? Oh, it looks so cool. And, I checked it out, and it's fucking terrible. I mean, it was terrible then. It's worse now. What the fuck is happening in this thing? Like, why is Gabriel Byrne? He's in prison? Like, what is happening here?
But he's still able to draw. He has an easel and everything in his
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
cell where he can draw.
Yeah, because that's how life would really be. The comic book artist that goes to prison would be fucking legit. Everybody would respect him in his time. Nothing bad would ever happen to him. No, it's lunacy. That's the most positive way you can describe this movie. It's absolute lunacy. Brad Pitt, like I said, when you ask my opinion of him, he's not necessarily terrible in it, but it's an interesting take.
He seems to be trying, but in a way where he feels like a lost puppy. Everyone has the problem of, like, the eye line thing, where anytime they're trying to look at the actual cartoon character's eyes, it's missing most of the time. He's putting in some kind of effort into that in a way, which is like he's such a young kid trying to make this work, and he just can't. Nobody can, but he's trying so hard, way harder than Byrne is, who's just like, I want to get the fuck out of here.
Like, this reminded me of Super Mario Brothers, the live action, in the regard that it's one of those movies where even as a child, when generally you love everything because you don't know anything, this was one where, yeah, even as a young person, you were like, this is garbage. Like, this fails on every level.
But, I'll at least give the Super Mario Brothers movie that it doesn't have as much, like, overstuffed quality that this movie does, where there's just a desperation with, like, in any given frame, especially in Cool World, how many times they have just cartoon shit happening in the margins. Like, it's a fucking bad Mad TV Al Jaffe, like, side thing that's going on at the bottom. It's not at the very bottom of the screen. It takes up, like, half of the screen where just two people are talking, and then, like, some random cartoon character will come up and, like, hit somebody on the head with a hammer. And there could be an infectious charm to that, but in practice here, it's just, like, it's trying to distract you from the badness that's going on with the rest of the movie. And it doesn't help that animation, for the most part, is quite terrible. Like, there's so much of this animation that clearly shows, oh, Paramount skimped on the budget, and these animators were just told, do whatever the fuck you want. And God bless him, it does not help the movie whatsoever.
Yeah, I was gonna say that because I do remember that it's just in the production that basically the animators didn't always have anything to work from, and we're just kind of told just you animate anything as long as it's funny, which funny being subjective, certainly. But yeah, so there's constantly poorly integrated animated things going on that have nothing to do with the story at large. Some of them you're just like, can I watch that movie? Can I follow like this guy chasing his wife with a rolling pin or something? Like, can I, like, what are they up to? That looks more interesting than whatever Brad Pitt and Kim Basinger have going on. But yeah, just too much of that.
Yeah, it's this weird thing, especially also that, like, so much of that animation, at least in the version that I saw that was on Amazon Prime, the animation where, like, it's actually inserted, like, you can see the line, because basically the way they would do this is they'd have the live action stuff playing out and just put the animation, like, over it for the film, but you can see the clear point where the animation stops. So, like, characters either appear or disappear in, like, right before the frame stops to any degree, so it's just, like, a sudden, like, they disappear into non-reality or whatever. Hollywood, when she's first introduced, there's like a big pan, and all of a sudden she just materializes out of nothing and then starts dancing. Shit like that, where it's just like, oh, either Amazon has a bad copy of this movie, or the actual screen version of this did not give a shit about actually cropping that correctly.
I was say, I'd say you're right. The actual version of this movie, it's crap, Thomas. Granted, it's the technology, is still rather new as far as integrating live action with cartoons, at least in full motion picture length form. But they clearly did not have sort of a handle on what they were doing.
In regards to what you were saying about the version that you watched, if it makes you feel any better, I watched it on YouTube. I rented it from YouTube, and yeah, all those flaws are there. Like, I don't care where you're watching it; it's bad.
I'm curious, how do you feel about Bakshi in general as an animation person, Mel?
He's one of those guys like R. Crumb. There's absolutely a place for that kind of animator, that kind of storyteller, and that kind of genre, for lack of a better term, especially now in the Disney rules all era that we're in, where everything more and more every day is starting to feel more kind of homogenous. I miss that kind of subversive era of animation, like Fire and Ice, and like Wizards, and like Rock and Rule, like stuff like that. I thought was really cool, because when you were a kid, it's really formative to see something outside of just kind of your standard after school and Saturday morning fare. You like your He-Man and your G.I. Joe, your stuff like that. So yeah, he's got a place. Sadly, I feel like the modern day incarnations of Ralph Bakshi, I don't love. I'm not even really sure who is that. Seth MacFarlane, Matt Stone, Trey Parker. Are they the ones carrying the mantle right now? Because I'm like, they don't really do it for me.
And even then, those guys have become industries in their own right, as opposed to like being the subversive quality that like Bakshi always was. To the degree like this is one of his only studio movies, and you can tell he got swallowed up by the machine, because whatever subversive quality, there's a bit of that in here. You can see that with particularly just Hollywood in general. Like, I could get how that character would be maybe formative to certain sides of the internet, but at the same time, like, there is this weird quality where, like, in theory, I would like to see Hollywood as like this femme fatale and this neo-noir movie that mixes up, like a more lascivious version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like, she is supposed to be like the more fully femme fatale version of like Jessica Rabbit. But the trouble is that like her character and the rules of this world make no fucking sense. Like, we're introduced to Cool World when Gabriel Byrne is randomly like transported there when she starts dancing at the club. And then we cut away from that to the real world where Gabriel Byrne just is like driving up to his house now. And it's like, wait, we're missing something. How the fuck did we get here? Like, there's so many points in this movie where you could just put up like an old silent film, real missing, and that would make sense of it more than what actually happens in the fucking movie. Just the weird leaps in logic. Especially even later when Gabriel Byrne, like the one fucking doctor dude tells us like he's supposed to have his full-on destiny as a hero fulfilled. Where was that?
Oh my
What the
god.
fuck are you talking about? And he becomes a superhero, and Gabriel Byrne disappears from the movie. He doesn't do the voice. It's like Maurice LaMarche, I think, doing the voice of that big superhero character, and he's not even in the fucking movie anymore.
Can you blame him, really?
No,
Like,
look, he really wanted
he saw
to
it
go.
out. He saw it out and took it.
I don't blame him, no. This was one of the earliest movies I can remember where I could clearly tell, like, something is off about it, and then learning about the production history and how so much of it is, like, on the first day of, like, pre-production, like, when they were on set, being told about shit, like, oh, we changed the script, and we changed the pages and stuff, to the degree that this movie feels like it's just tonally confused and all over the place. Where at some points it wants to be full-on Looney Tunes and silly with the cartoon characters, and at other points it wants to be this darker, weird fantasy edging on horror movie about the idea of, like, a cartoon wanting to become a real person, but it never coalesces into anything that makes any remote fucking sense.
With the multiverse, the idea of the multiverse being so ubiquitous right now, I would have loved to have been able to peek into the reality where he got to make this exactly the way he wanted, because, like, clearly it feels like the only thing they kept from the original idea were the backgrounds, those gorgeous twisted, like heavy metal, like late 70s filmation, like styled, like hand-painted backgrounds that were clearly out of a nightmare. Like, all of that, I feel like those still images are the strongest thing about the movie. I wanted to see the final production that was tied to those instead of what we ended up with.
Yeah, I agree that, like, I think I like the best thing I can say is the production design sort of a cool with it's like some of those matte paintings and stuff. Even, like, when you have humans interacting with the cartoons in Cool World, it's a lot of these, like, 2D sort of, like, cutouts of, like, street lamps and all these other things that are designed in the way of, like, these backgrounds you're talking about kind of stayed there. It looks like a cheap stage play at certain points because I don't think Ralph Bakshi is that skilled as, like, a live action director to, like, film that in the right way, so you don't see, like, the seams of it, or maybe you're supposed to see the seams. I don't know. It's a good idea, though. I like the idea of, like, being in a world where, like, because a human's interacting, like, the sort of cartoonish elements take on a new element to it. Even, like, the idea when later on you have Gabriel Byrne in Hollywood, like, in the real world, and you have, like, real Kim Basinger and Gabriel Byrne occasionally turn into cartoon characters, like they're transforming almost. I like that idea. But once again, the rules aren't established nearly well enough to where when that happens, I'm just confused as, like, why is this happening? Why are they doing this? What's going on?
Yeah. It feels like the first two acts, honestly, have very little bearing on the third act. It's like the movie doesn't even really figure out what it wants to be about until the climax, when it's just clearly the idea is that the union of a doodle and a Noid, as they call the humans, the union of these two just leads to a plague of biblical proportions that spills out into the real world. So it's like we never realized that those were the stakes we were playing for, which I guess makes for a nice surprise. But yeah, like the first hour really just feels like a different movie trying to accomplish something else.
Yeah, really the only thing that kind of carries over besides some of, like, the main characters is that professor guy who's at the very opening just like, oh, well, Brad Pitt, welcome to Cool World. I will teach you everything that's going on. And that motherfucker disappears for an hour until he comes back as a dude, like, a small guy in a fucking trench coat. It's like, oh, well, I'm back here, and I'm going to explain a bunch of things in the 20 minutes before this movie ends.
He's basically like, it's like a shell story almost at that point. He's like the old man from the beginning and end of Saving Private Ryan.
It doesn't know what it's trying to do at all. Like you said, there's a cool idea here, and it's something that could, potentially be really interesting and fun. It's almost too busy trying to be crass, which, again, I don't mind crassness in animation. Like, Bashki's been doing it forever. And this movie, it's almost like that's all it really wants to give you is a lot of hyped up sexual energy with no real discernible plot or reason behind it that can carry the weight of this 90 minutes or whatever it is. It's just a huge misfire on every possible level, from, all the way down to creative decisions and acting decisions and even wardrobe in some parts. It's just, the movie's just a fucking mess, dude. It's an absolute mess.
That is a long 90 minutes too.
It lasts absolutely forever.
But I would say at the very least, this is definitely fits into sort of like in the bad movies camp that we've talked about. This definitely feels more like a train wreck bad movie, where I'm not like entertained in a so bad it's good way, but I'm also never bored. I'm just confused the whole fucking time, which is something at least. Like I'm like hang my hat on like what? We're doing this now? It's a lot of that. It's a lot of like questioning every single tacit turn. Like even like with the crassness Adam's talking about, that is so exemplified by the weird group of like thug animated characters that are around like the little baby with the knife hands and the one woman who really wants to have sex with Gabriel Byrne. Like those cartoon characters are nothing. Like the one of them is literally just I want to fuck Hollywood. That's all my character is. That's all every single bit of me. Just I want to have sex with you, Holly. Please have sex with me. And it's just like once again, the first two acts of it where we spend time in Cool World are like these weird shenanigan like storylines that are going on. Like even Brad Pitt has his whole storyline where he wants to end up with the Candy Milo character, the cartoon woman who works at the saloon. I want to be with you, but at the same time, I want to abide by the rules of Cool World, and I'm annoyed that I can't have sex with you. And all this other stuff. And his fucking buddy, the spider guy, who is one of the more confusing side characters too, where it's just like, is he like gonna double cross Brad Pitt? Or is he on his side? That whole like phone call conversation that happens at a certain point, we're just like, I don't know, like, are you a double, triple, quadruple, quintuple agent? What the fuck are you doing? What is your motivation again?
I feel like Ed Harris in Glengarry Glen Ross when he's just like, what is this in aid of? like what is all of this for? Because if my only two choices are confusion and boredom, I guess I'll choose confusion every time. But yeah, how far does that get you really?
I mean, it gets us to the point of, like you mentioned, like a plague of affecting Las Vegas of cartoon characters and bullshit like that. That makes no logical sense whatsoever. But at the same time, it's just like, okay, we've watched like for this show so many like extremely boring movies. As opposed to like this one is a colossal nightmare. But at the same time, that still doesn't give it like the merit of like, oh, this is one I would recommend to people. Not at all. Not even on the level of like, oh, this is a fun kind of train wreck to watch like unfold. Only if like you're an animation historian, maybe a Ralph Bakshi completionist, I could see you maybe having interest in getting something else out of this, because there are points of good animation, I would say. I think my favorite bit of it is there's the one guy who, I'm not sure what his purpose is, but the big purple guy in the suit who runs into a bunch of like street kids, just like, here's some wooden nickels, and the nickels are like sentient and start attacking them. That's like probably the best bit of like actual theatrical looking animation, but that's cut in between. Like there's so many points where this feels like sub Hanna-Barbera bullshit in terms of the animation style, in terms of just like the quality of the animation. Like you can totally tell at certain points it's just like, this is where the budget ran out. This is where some of the budget didn't quite work out for you. Or even with like Hollywood, when like her or Gabriel Byrne turn into the cartoon characters in the real world, it is like some of the worst versions, like the rotoscoping that Basquiat has done so well in other things. But in those cases, it's just like, oh, we have nothing that we can do. Or even like when the tunes start invading and they start just like affecting other Las Vegas patrons. And clearly it's just like, let's have something here for a few seconds that kind of vaguely looks like a weird cartoon thing.
That's a weird place to set the climax. Like we're supposed to care that Las Vegas is being wiped off the face of the earth, and I'm just like, sorry guys, you backed the wrong horse. Like I'm not gonna miss anybody from Vegas.
I don't know, but Frank Sinatra Jr.'s performance got interrupted by Kim Basinger doing that terrible song. Mel, don't you feel so much for him when that happened?
You mentioned the rotoscoping before, and Bakshi, man, that guy loves the rotoscoping, always has. I'm in a weird place about it. Like I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done poorly, and he's honestly been responsible for both, like over his storied career. It's such a weird thing in animation circles when people talk about rotoscoping, because like a lot of people don't even really consider it a valid form of animation. I don't quite feel that bad about it. It's weird though, because I think my problem with it is 9 times out of 10, it just doesn't integrate well with the animation that isn't rotoscope. Like it clearly looks like it's being meddled with. It's like your eye sees it and just and just something's wrong, even if you don't know what it is. Like that recent Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie that came out. There's a great line in that where they're talking about early 2000 CG. And one of them says, remember that era in animation where everything looked real, but nothing looked right? And that's exactly what rotoscoping is to me.
Right, yeah. Robert Zemeckis picked up the torch of that kind of weird rotoscoping for the worse, like around that era for sure. But yeah, like in here even, like there's points where he clearly uses, like I think it's used best when like Holly's doing her dancing.
Yes,
I would say. I think that's probably like some of the best examples of the animation in general in this movie. But low bar. Probably my favorite like sort of effect of the movie is the bit where after they have their weird sex scene, her and Gabriel Byrne. And she starts transforming into actual Kim Basinger. I do like that effect quite a bit, like the dissolve that happens from like her cartoonish self to Kim Basinger. And I kind of like was fascinated by that particular element of it. Then she becomes Kim Basinger, just kind of acting like a weird cartoon character, not even like the same Hollywood when she gets into the real world after that point. And it's another thing where it's just like, is Hollywood like a villain of the story or not? They don't really know where to go, but it's not like an interesting moral ambiguity. They're just left and right don't know what to do with the fucking character or any of the characters. Like I mentioned, Gabriel Byrne turns into a fucking Superman at a certain point. And even before we get into final thoughts about this movie, we should definitely talk a bit more about Pitt. Because I think, I'm curious, Mel, what do you think? This was around, I guess, the era you were talking about, where he was kind of like in the bad zone for you, necessarily. Do you feel like he's kind of lesser in this movie, or he's at least trying? How do you feel about him in this?
Yeah, this was definitely one of the before he changed my mind. It's difficult to blame him or even his performance, because he's clearly doing this very kind of like 40s like gumshoe kind of like Sam Spade kind of guy in this with the voice and the inflection and all the mannerisms. So like I guess all that's fine, but the material, wow, it's like he really hasn't, it's empty calories. He has nothing to work with there. So I guess I applaud him for making of it what he did. If I never saw another Brad Pitt film after this to change my mind, I would have written him off. I think I would have just been like, oh, that guy's going nowhere. Which is sad, very, very heartbreaking.
Yeah, particularly the bit early on when it's like fully live action and his mother has just died in that horrible car accident, and he's getting PTSD and he's doing oh, look over there, oh, they're maybe in the trees, oh no, medic, get a medic. I'm like, oh, Bradley, you shouldn't be here. This is embarrassing. I feel so bad for him in that, or even like later on, like he is part of like one of the biggest, dumbest moments of this movie that is clearly like bad ADR, where he dies falling from this like hotel, and his character is then transported back to Cool World by his spider assistant guy. She's like, oh no, he's gone, we can't get him back. It's like, wait, was he killed by a tune? Why was that? Oh, if he's killed by a tune in the real world, then he can become a tune here, and then he becomes a cartoon character. One of many moments, just like, I guess, fuck it, right? Just fuck it, sure.
A new rule every minute in that movie, and just whatever the movie needs, just throw that in there. Whatever you got to do to get to the credits, man, just use it.
Probably can agree with Mel. If he wouldn't have come out with anything after this, I mean, I would have probably written him off as well. And the fact that, I mean, we got to be honest here, and I hate to even put it this way, but the fact that he's so ridiculously good looking, even in this movie, that's probably what got him another chance. Because what the fuck else could have? Like, anybody who would have seen this movie would have been like, oh no, we're not casting this guy. There's no way. It is such a weird performance. Like I said, you got the PTSD bit and the very, the sort of flashback opening bit and all that stuff. But then when he's trying to play the neo-noir detective in the way too big suit, I mean, it is ridiculous. But even like his voice changes, his whole demeanor changes. None of it works. Like, none of it works at all. It's fascinating. I will say that, like Thomas, you alluded to the whole movie as a whole, but even just Pitt in this movie, you kind of can't stop looking at him. It's I don't know if it is the suit or how good he looks, or just the choices that are being made. Like the director is probably feeding him a lot of these ideas, but also just going with it. It's just, it's so bizarre. It's a performance unlike any he's ever given before or since. I mean, thankfully. It's just, yeah, if you're a batch key completionist or you like this type of animation, like rotoscoping and stuff, which if anybody's doing rotoscoping, batch key's probably done it the best. I can think of like Wizards and basically almost all of Fire and Ice looks legit, but this is just everything seems kind of half-assed in this one. Like obviously it's probably the creative differences and the fact that the original nightmarish plot was abandoned pretty quickly, but it's just, if you want to watch early Brad Pitt stuff too, I guess it's there for that. But other than that, I'd be hard pressed to recommend this to anybody, be it a Brad Pitt fan or an animation fan. It's just, there's nothing here.
Those sound like pretty good final thoughts, and we should probably move on to our next feature in a bit. But Mel, what about your final thoughts on Cool World?
Whenever I watch stuff, I can usually say, "Oh, I know blank would like this, or so and so would like this." I don't know who. All of my friends are like in like comics and animation and film, and I'm just like, I could not recommend this. Like they would be angry with me if I recommended it to them. I would like someone to try this again. Is what I want. I'd like a Cool World reboot. I think the idea, and when I say idea, I'm not really sure which one, because there are like 7 in the movie, like all vying for the crown. But if someone could get like one good solid idea and just commit to it, I would like someone to try again with a proper budget, proper creative control, some real themes to explore. Because sadly, the one that disturbs me the most is I think unintentionally, I think the movie makes a statement about interracial relationships that doesn't go well. Yeah, clean that up, maybe give it another go. Like I would be very interested to see it like redone with the kind of care that a lot of old things are now being revisited with. I think there's potential there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that, I've always said do it with something that didn't quite work the first time. And Cool World fits that moniker quite well. It didn't quite work this first effort. But yeah, it's one of those movies that's definitely, I think, more fascinating just hearing about kind of like the background about it. A lot of the production stuff. Just even weird things like they were so desperate to really promote this movie that they literally put Hollywood on the Hollywood sign, like a big cutout of her. Just on the famous Hollywood sign and shit. They're just like so desperate to make this work. And I think like all the production weird stories I've heard about this movie are more fascinating to me than just ultimately the movie itself is just this massive mismatched disasters, like one after the other. Just so many weird ideas trying to work and most of them just really falling apart despite some interesting animation, some cool, interesting little bits and pieces. Even, I will say, Pitt in this movie is definitely, it's the best example of like a guy who is not doing a good performance but is really trying, which is way more than you can say for most of the other cast members. Even some of the voice actors aren't putting their best effort into it compared to Pitt is trying so hard and flailing and failing, but in at least fascinating ways. Yeah, this is more of a bizarre, infamous bad movie than it is necessarily one that is an undiscovered gem or whatever. Like people like to kind of like rediscover movies that were like failed the first time. It's like, no, this is secretly brilliant. Not quite with Cool World. No, I wouldn't put that on it. But maybe if somebody else could take some of the ideas of Cool World and make it into something better, I'd love to see them try.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be relitigating this. Like, you're not going to find any YouTube videos like Cool World is good, actually.
I don't know. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised with some of the things people defend. But I don't know. Paramount Plus, coming soon. Cool World. The limited series. 8 episodes. Who knows? Maybe.
Prestige.
Prestige. Emmy, please. But let's get into our good feature now. Ad Astra.
What are you thinking about?
I do what I do because of my dad. He was a hero. He gave his life for the pursuit of knowledge.
Major, we have some highly classified information.
What can you tell us about the Lima project?
Its objective was to search for advanced extraterrestrial life. The ship disappeared approximately 16 years into the mission.
And the commander was?
He was my father, sir.
This might come as quite a shock to you. Your father was experimenting with a highly classified material that could threaten our entire solar system. All life would be destroyed. We're counting on you to find out what's happening out there.
So Ad Astra came out September 20th, 2019 from director James Gray, who co-wrote it with Ethan Gross. And if you're unaware of this movie, you might be, because this was not a huge success when it came out in 2019. As Adam kind of alluded to earlier, this was the year where everyone was very obsessed with Pitt's performance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and admittingly, like, you know, they got him his first acting Oscar finally, and it's a great performance in that particular movie. But Ad Astra kind of came out, it was dumped in September, and was sort of a big victim, from what I understand, of the Fox-Disney merger. Because Fox had been making this movie and had been through some production problems, like some reshoots and shit like that, throughout the past couple years after it was filmed. And then Disney bought Fox and was like, what the fuck is this? Ad Astra? Sure, Brad Pitt's in it, but like, fuck it, it's in September, whatever, might get some Oscar nominations, which you got a Best Sound Mixing nomination, deserved, I would say. But if you're unaware of this movie, basically, it is about Brad Pitt, who plays an acclaimed astronaut, who has been very famous for, like, his blood pressure doesn't go up that much, even in the middle of, like, huge disasters. Like, at the opening, there's a big disaster involving, like, a big satellite crumbling apart, but he survives and he keeps his cool. So they enlist him on a new top-secret mission, and this top-secret mission is to go to I forgot, is it, like, the Neptune Project?
That's right.
What is it? Yeah, the Neptune Project, where basically
or the
his father...
Lima Project.
The Lima Project, yes,
yeah,
which
but
basically...
it was
Right, in Neptune, where his father, who was a famous astronaut Tommy Lee Jones had been on, he went missing like several years ago, back when Brad Pitt was like a teenager, and they found new like big bursts of like energy that have been coming off of Neptune, where the Lima Project was last heard of. And so he's basically assigned to go after his father, see what's going on over there in Neptune, hopefully stop whatever is causing these big solar flares to happen. And Brad Pitt goes on a little journey to the moon, and then eventually to Mars, and throughout the solar system to find his father. And this was my good pick, and it's not necessarily my favorite Brad Pitt movie, but I find it really fascinating, just as, like, once again, given that, like, kind of Disney Fox thing, Mel kind of references what we're talking about, Cool World, that sort of, like, Disney commodification of big massive blockbusters. This was like a movie that would never really get made again. I'm surprised it got even made in 2019, of like this contemplative, slow-paced, $100 million budget sci-fi movie that mainly boils down to Brad Pitt has issues with his dad, and he's going on this journey to find his dad. And even like the set pieces feel very muted in an interesting way. And I really do dig this movie quite a bit. But Mel, had you seen this movie before?
I had. I was actually there opening night. I think it's a great performance from him. I think it's a great performance from Tommy Lee Jones, who is in it like 8 minutes or however long. I think the only thing wrong with this movie, and it's not even the movie's fault, is that it falls prey to basically what amounts to false advertising, because the trailer for this really made it look like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. Like there were dune buggies on the moon and space pirates, and like things are blowing up left, right, and center. And then you get to the theater and sit down, and it's not that at all.
It's like those elements are there, but not in that traditional way whatsoever.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I do remember I saw this actually with my dad, who was super excited for it. And the first thing he said the moment we walked out of the theater was just, well, that wasn't what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't quite. I think particularly once we get to like the baboon, that really threw him for a fucking loop, that this like slow contemplative sci-fi actioner had like a baboon monster attack movie in the middle of it. One of many things. But I know, Adam, you're a big fan of this one as well.
Yeah, I absolutely am. I mean, this is completely right up my alley too. It's, slow burn, contemplative sci-fi that also just in the middle of it has, even though it's only like 2.5 minutes long, but one of the coolest sort of lunar car chases. Like, what the hell is going on? How cool is this? The minimal sound Just makes it work so much better, because that's one of the biggest mistakes movies do in general when they take place in space, and you could hear the gunshots or the explosions and all that. Like, there's no fucking way. This one does it amazingly. But yeah, no, I think this movie is pretty much perfect. It's just wonderful, muted, understated performance from Pitt. It's just, there's so much here that just works. Donald Sutherland is great in his little bit. Ruth Negga is fantastic in it. All the side characters you meet around Pitt are terrific, but at its core, it's just a father-son sort of daddy issue movie, and about depression and loss and resentment and guilt, and just people turning out not to be who you might have thought they were, and the people you sort of idolize and champion, turn out to be monsters. And it's just a fucking terrifically shot film too. That's the thing. This movie looks incredible. The cinematography is absolutely fantastic. The use of minimal color and then just shots of bright red or something like that. It makes the whole thing just pleasure to watch. 100%.
And I'm a sucker for any like father and son movie. That's how you get me. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, sibling rivalries. Those are kind of like the three things that draw me in. You get to Tommy Lee Jones at the end, and he just lays it all out there. He's just like, I've never cared about you or your mom or any of your bullshit. He was just searching for the big answers, dedicated his life to that. And it's a little cliche, is not the word I want to use. I think modern audiences can be a little cynical, but I agree with the big takeaway, and that's just that life it's not what you're searching for. It's what's going on in the moment that you should be embracing.
Now, what you're saying is it's not about the destination; it's the journey. Whoa! Big revelations here, buddy. Totally unaware of this concept. But no, I agree that I think it's a movie that goes about that kind of thing, and I love so much like that scene where he finally encounters Tommy Lee Jones, because like the whole journey of the movie has basically been about kind of that hero worship you have of somebody who left at a certain point in your life, but you're like, but I know they left for a good cause, and they're a good person, and they're doing big meaningful things in the world and the universe and everything. Like, they're finding out things that we'll eventually come to know about as time goes on. I'm sure it'll be great, because he even talks about that in some of, admittingly, my biggest problem with this movie is the voiceover. You can very much tell, like, it's not really needed most of the time. It feels definitely like that was studio mandated to a certain degree, of just like the bits where he's going around like the lunar base, which I love the fact that it's just over commercialized and shit. We didn't need him saying like, if my dad saw this, he'd kick everybody's ass to Timbuktu. Like, I kind of got that based on like what he was fucking talking about earlier. But like the whole journey is him basically having this complex, but like, nope, my dad is a great guy. I'm gonna like find him, and I'm sure he's gonna had so many discoveries about what actually is happening. And you go there, and you find out your dad's a wounded dude who did some horrible fucked up shit and was awful, and all of this like time, all these people that you also hurt in the process getting here, Brad Pitt, it was to find out that your dad was a fucking piece of shit who you shouldn't have hero worshipped all that much. And at the same time, they don't treat Tommy Lee Jones like a villain. I love the fact that when you see him, he's a wounded animal, basically. Like, he's so frightful, despite the fact that he's saying like, oh, I don't give a shit about you or your mom or anything else. When Brad Pitt tries to like touch him, Tommy Lee Jones looks like a Saint Bernard naturally. But it's like if you found one with a broken foot, and he's like, no, I don't want to get near you. No. It's like, oh, Tommy, no.
I mean, it's the saddest thing, honestly. Like you're right. They don't villainize him. It's horrible what he does, but you do feel for him. I mean, because he came all this way to find the answer to the question. There's that old saying, when the gods want to punish us, they answer our prayers. Like, he had the one question, and the sad thing is, he got the answer, but the answer was no, and that hurts. That has to break you, especially when your entire identity is wrapped around this one idea.
And it almost seems like even the stuff he's saying to Brad Pitt, but like, I didn't care about any of that stuff, is also a lie he's telling himself, because it's just like, no, I went all this way, and it was for a good thing, and fuck you guys on Earth. I did this for a good reason. It's like, oh no, you didn't. You know that this was just like for nothing. Yeah. And you're so upset about it. But at the same time, no, you got that answer. It's that whole thing where like sometimes the scientific method gives us the answer and we want to do trials again. over and over. It's like, no, you're getting the same result, dude. The same result multiple times over at a certain point becomes madness. And that's what he's gotten space madness, full on Ren and Stimpy space madness. And it's just shown through, once again, a sad, wounded puppy. But I like that Brad Pitt also has a lot of that, even as like he's finding out things like from Ruth Negga, where it's like, your dad killed my parents and this is your thing to bear. That's your fucking problem, buddy. At this point, like, he accepts that, but also he just realizes, like, man, all these times where I've been fucking cool, it's only been because I was wanting to be like my dad. That's the only reason I was this cool customer who got all this, like, acclaim or whatever. And I can't even accept the fact that, no, that just came from me naturally. It came from, like, me wanting to make daddy happy. And it's like, guess what, dude? You shouldn't make that dude happy. He didn't give a fuck about you. But, yeah, like, just the fact that, like, Brad Pitt kills so many people on this journey. So many people die in his wake. It feels kind of like a weird subversion where, like I mentioned Matt Damon and George Clooney earlier, weirdly, there were 3 different movies in the 2010s that were about, like, ocean skies going to space. And in the 2 other ones, like, in Gravity, George Clooney was, like, the ultimate pillar of, like, no, I'm the greatest astronaut possible. I'm going to inspire Sandra Bullock to keep going even though I'm dead. Even though I'm not in the movie for most of it. I'm going to be, like, the big inspiration point to keep her going. And then Matt Damon was like, I'm going to science the shit out of this in The Martian. Meanwhile, Brad Pitt was just like, I'm going to be that cool customer, kind of like Clooney and Damon were in their movies. But at a certain point, I'm going to realize, like, oh no, I'm a scared man who wants to make daddy love me. And I'm going to unfortunately kill people along the way to make sure daddy loves me.
It's hard to deny that. Like, I'm looking inward. I'm looking at myself and I'm like, am I a sad man who will destroy anything in my wake for my father's approval? Am I also that guy? Hopefully not.
No, I don't think you would murder people along the way, Mel, and this is all legally binding. None of us would do that. So if there's any accusations, no.
I will straight kill everyone. Anybody who's listening to this,
satire, parody. The thoughts of Adam Thomas do not reflect those of Double H.
Your fucking number is up if you're listening to this.
But what do you think about some of that stuff, Adam, with, like, the father-son relationship?
I don't necessarily never have really had a super strong relationship with my father either, but it's heartbreaking. Like I said, you could tell he's sort of idolized his father, and the fact that, even got into the same field with him. He even says my father was a hero and all this stuff. Believes his dad's been dead this long, and then he finds out he's still there, and he does whatever it takes to get to him, including anybody in this movie who's not Brad Pitt. Just don't work with Brad Pitt or be associated with him. You are going to die in sometimes really horrific ways and depressing ways. But it's just the ultimate goal of trying to seek your father's approval by being the hero to him and rescuing him and, bringing him back home and all that stuff. And then when you find out, like, Tommy Jones referenced I never much cared for you or your mother. This is my work. This is what I need to do. And ultimately the sort of existential crisis he suffers when he gets an answer to what his question is, but it's just not the answer he wanted or not the answer he believed in, and how it just dismantles a man's psyche. And there's no coming back from that. And the fact that it's our hero's father is just makes it even ultimately more devastating. He gets to go back and he has the Hollywoodized ending with Liv Tyler in the restaurant, and he's given his final speech. The main thing is to love now, and I live and love and all that, and that's great. But he's a man in his late 40s, and he's just now learning this, and it's just now having to sort of redefine who he is as a person, not just Tommy Lee Jones's son. Like, who is Roy? And it's a really cool story. It's really great, but it's ultimately, this movie is just filled with tragedy.
Mm-hmm. That voiceover being the biggest tragedy of all.
I don't mind it. I really don't mind the voiceover. Is it necessary? No, but it doesn't really take away from me either. I like good voiceovers, but I also like them when there's not much to it. It's just kind of here and there. I mean, some of the lines are stupid. I agree, especially the one you said, Thomas, but I don't mind it. I think it's fine.
It's certainly not the level of Blade Runner bad.
Because at least, Brad Pitt seems to be giving a shit.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to Harrison Ford, just like, I'm a Blade Runner. That's what they call me.
Wasn't that Charlie Kaufman, too, who came in late in the game to write that?
He did some uncredited rewrites on the voiceover. Yes, I believe. Right. But maybe my issues with the voiceover kind of come from the fact that this movie did such an astonishing, great job with world building without the need of voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love the look of even, like I mentioned, like the moon base that's full of like almost like a TGI Fridays restaurants and like mascots and shit like that. That we've commercialized the moon as a thing that like we're trying to get away from Earth, but also just like, no, we're bringing Earth to these other planetary systems. Our shitty like commercialized ideas of like what life should be, we're gonna bring to the fucking stars and do that shit. But even when we go to like, I love the look of Mars in this movie so much, particularly that one hallway where Ruth Negga comes up to Brad Pitt and the way that like the lights cascade and shit like that. I love the look of all that, just to show off that like, yeah, Mars is this place that like we've kind of colonized to this degree, and we've tried to integrate some of our things, like weird therapies, like the room that has like all the screens on it to try and calm you down. I love that scene so much, where after Brad Pitt finds out all this shit, just like, oh look, here's this calm landscape and everything, he's having like a fucking nervous breakdown in the middle of this room. Like, I love the elements where it just shows that like, oh, we've tried to integrate these things that make it look like we're an official, you know, like NASA sponsored like facility here, but it's hiding just the fact that we're in the middle of space in the unknown, and we're just trying to put this facade up for ourselves, just like, nope, we know how to handle this, we can bring Earth to the stars. And it's like, no, you can't.
or you can, but should you?
Right, or exactly, there's a lot of that. But yeah, well, what do you love about, like, what about some of the sci-fi set pieces and world building elements for you, Mel?
I love that room where it looks like acoustic soundproofing material. Where it's like a bunch of like rectangular shapes just kind of at audience.
Brad Pitt goes in to do some VO, like the ADR for the movie, and that's
right. Yeah, no, that's super cool. I love the look of Neptune. Just this kind of this like wash of blue, and the rings. It's all very striking. Yeah, this was like the era of like good looking space movies, because like First Man came out around the same time.
Very underrated space movie,
and that was gorgeous too. It's like people really figured out how to shoot shit in space. So a couple of things just like stick out to me. Like the voiceover is one thing. Like with you, Adam, like the voiceover is not bad. I've certainly seen worse, but or heard worse. But I wish, like, I think that movie's so good at letting you sit with moments that sometimes I felt like the voiceover intruded, and I wanted to, like, you don't, like, there's that line at the end of Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx where he gets shot and he's sitting on the subway and he retells that story about a guy dies on a subway and his body's just doing laps around for, does anybody even notice? Like, there's no need to reiterate that, because we get the point of what the movie is saying. Like, we heard that story told early on, and now here you are in that same position. I don't need you to bring that back up.
There's a much worse version of that. It's not even the voiceover in this movie. It's Tommy Lee Jones saying, "You gotta let me go." It's like, oh, really? Is that what you got to do right now? Is that? I wonder if there's some sort of larger existential reasoning behind those words. I wonder if that means something else beyond literally letting him go.
It can be on the nose. I also think the baboon massacre, I love that. It's a little on the nose too, because it's just like, here's a movie that's in part about the search for God, and here comes Darwin to just burn all that down.
I think there's definitely like a lot of elements like that where this feels so much like, if you had told me some of this on paper, this would sound like a fucking Roger Corman cheap ass 70s era like space movie. But I like the fact that it's kind of James Gray clearly taking influence from some of those things, but integrating them in his kind of like much calmer style. Like, he's a filmmaker who does that a lot. Like, I would recommend We Own the Night, the Walking Phoenix, Mark Wahlberg movie, which feels a lot like one of those, like, oh, it's a typical crime movie, but it's much more character focused and a lot more subtle, and also has like the big thrills, like that fucking car chase in We Own the Night is so fucking good. One of the best car chases I've ever seen. And even in this movie, with, like we mentioned earlier, the whole like rover chase, I love how like that's an element once again that you could see in like Ice Pirates or some bullshit space movie from like 20, 30 years ago. As opposed to here, it plays out like a car chase that is working with the actual limitations of gravity of the atmosphere of the moon. And even like when they pull out the guns and stuff and they like shoot them at people, the laser bullets sorts take a while to travel. And the car crash even that occurs with the rover, like it takes a bit for it to like explode in the way that a traditional car chase would. I love elements like that, where it's just like, this is a clearly like schlocky sci-fi concept, and we're taking taking it to a lower pace, like realistic as much as it can be, sci-fi conceit.
And that's a great idea. I love the idea of that, like taking something schlocky and treating it with sincerity. Like that's that's good stuff. You've ascended when you can do that as a filmmaker. So yeah, go you. Good on you.
Right, even like at the ending when like he's going through the rings and he's got like the one thing shielding him. Once again, feels like it'd be some bullshit in like a really lame sci-fi movie from some older time, but it really works. Is that what really appeals to you about it, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I'm really a big fan of this movie as far as how just kind of quiet it is, and it's just real, like I said, real, just subtle, most of it. But then, yeah, you'll have this crazy fucking baboon thing and this space chase, and you're like, what the fuck is it? Like, it's just, it's almost silly, but like you said, Thomas, it's treated with the utmost, sort of respect, and the stakes are really like kind of drilled home, and you feel them. Like when the fucking guy who's driving the rover takes the shot to the mask, you're like, Jesus Christ. It's just, it's absurd. But the fact that it's, like I said, handled with the utmost seriousness, and it just sucks you in instantly, and you're like, yeah, of course, yeah, it makes sense in this movie. This sort of movie about the importance of man and God and intelligent life and humanity. Yay, there's a moon rover chase. Fuck it. Why not? It's just like, it's one step away from them going over a hill, and then they're on the dark side of the moon from Transformers. I mean, it's absolutely lunacy, but it just works so well because everything else around it is so quiet and contemplative, to where these moments of action in a really weird way are almost the levity points of the film.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they even managed to establish some of this like more grounded stuff with just even some of the supporting cast members. Like we mentioned a couple of them, like Ruth Negga, but even like Donald Sutherland showing up and playing this with the utmost sincerity about just like, I knew your father and he got me off the project and I have so much regret about that. Or even my favorite person who shows up and instantly like grounds like that sort of lived in element of this movie is fucking Natasha Lyonne. Showing up as like the security person, which just love that she's treating it like she's a blue collar worker. Like, all right, come here, put your hand on there. All right, go to the next place, guys, have a fun time. And I love the fact that apparently she got that job because she's neighbors with James Gray at like the same apartment complex.
That's right. Yeah, they live in the same building.
And he was just like, she was visiting, like, oh, what are you doing? What's this space movie? Fuck yeah, I'll do that. I want to do that. Give me a pot, James. It's like, okay, sure, Natasha. It's just instantly like, and she fits in perfectly, weirdly, despite that she's fucking Natasha Lyonne. He's like, nope. The security checkpoint person, like, all right, go to the next place. Have a good day. Bye. Like, she's a toll booth operator on Mars. And I mean, there's a lot of other people. Like, I love Lisa Gate Hamilton showing up as one of like the people instructing Brad Pitt about the job, or even John Ortiz shows up. Like, even Liv Tyler, I think it's one of her better performances in a while, just because she's, despite the fact she's playing kind of the thankless role of like, I'm the woman who like he keeps aspiring to go back to. At the same time, she feels like very sincere. Like in that video message Brad Pitt sees, we're just like, look, you weren't fucking around, man. Like, you were there, but you weren't really around as like a fucking person to me. And that really fucking hurt our relationship. And you can see that regret on Pitt's face. And I think this is really a movie where like it plays on so much of Brad Pitt's persona as like the cool collected guy. At the same time, you see so much like when he starts breaking down after a certain point, like you feel him actually crumbling as a person. That's why I've always liked him as like a movie star, is that like he has that natural cool to him, but when Brad Pitt has ever like fallen apart, it feels 100% sincere. Like you can tell like there are points where like that sort of movie star sheen breaks down, and I think this is one of the better examples of displaying that for him.
Yeah, never underestimate the power of vulnerability. Like it, especially for, like you said, like a guy like him. It's kind of like a little bit of a cliche where you're fighting to hold back the one tear. So when the tear does eventually come after 2 hours of you resisting it, like there is catharsis, there is a release there that feels earned. So yeah, it's nice to see this kind of, I mean, he's an astronaut. He's like the toughest of the tough guys, but yeah, to watch him kind of get taken apart piece by piece throughout this journey.
Yes, and he's one of those guys where like that sort of like holding back one tear thing, only a real movie star can make that fucking moment work. Because in many other hands, that could be like, this is the dumbest bullshit. This isn't going to fucking work. But then he does, like, God damn it, Brad. You're crumbling with that one tear. I can see it in your eyes. Either that tear, that's not supposed to be there at all. But let's go ahead and wrap up with our final thoughts here. Mel, your final thoughts on Ad Astra.
Unlike Cool World, I don't want to see someone remake this. I thought this, it's really great. I'd like to see another trailer recut that actually tells you what kind of movie this is you're getting into, because I feel like that gamble backfired. You talk about people who got hurt by the Fox Disney merger. I'm one of them. They didn't believe that audiences would come to this, so they made a trailer that looked like something audiences would flock to. And whenever like that didn't happen, that didn't pan out because word got around super fast that that's not what this movie is. Like this is a much smarter, quieter, like introspective kind of thing. I mean, musing on the relationships of fathers and sons and God and religion. I don't want to use the term thinking man's cinema. That seems oddly elitist, but yeah, come to it, sit down, immerse yourself in it, just let it run, just let it play. It's such a treat.
Adam, your final thoughts on Ad Astra?
It's a wonderful movie. Not only does it look great, but it hits you in the feels. It's got just brilliant acting all around, especially from our lead, our man of this, our topic. It looks great, sounds great, great story, perfectly executed for the story that they're trying to tell. If you're into sort of heady sci-fi, you can't go wrong with this. If you like Brad Pitt and you want to see one of his better performances, and I would argue of the two performances of the year that he won the Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think this is even a better performance than that. If you haven't seen it and you like Brad Pitt, or if you like sci-fi, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, that kind of slow introspective sci-fi, when we get that nowadays, it's usually sort of like an A24 level. It's like, I would say, like a recent one, After Yang, the Colin Farrell movie, is a great example of that. But that's also a much lower budget, as opposed to, this is a $100 million budget movie that could have only been made really before that like kind of Disney merger happened, where it's like not based on like an actual IP, it's an original story that costs over $100 million and has a big star involved, but still had some studio meddling things involved in it, not nearly as bad as, say, like a Cool World. But it still had like some of those little bits of compromise that I think slightly negated from being like the absolute brilliant perfect movie it could be. But at the same time, it still is like has its own definitive personality and quiet contemplative nature to it that makes it so much more fascinating than a lot of the sci-fi movies we tend to get that are of like that budget scale. And even just we didn't mention this, but I love the use of the actual look of like the space stations and the planets, and finding out that most of that was not actually CGI. James Gray actually used a lot of like the effects from like 2001, A Space Odyssey, where it's like a lot of models, and even like the planets are a lot of like pictures that are like sort of superimposed over a spacescape and stuff like that. And I dig down to earth, ironically, use of like those kind of like older special effects techniques to make this look so unique for especially this era. And it's phenomenal performances from Pitt and everybody else that's involved. It's a great example of, especially given he's a producer on this as well, this is also through Plan B, what Pitt is willing to kind of like champion and use his star image for. But it's time we did our weekly segment now, the Double Redo. Double Redo. Double Redo. Double Redo. Double Redo.
Double redo. Double redo.
That works. So the Double Redo is a segment we do every week where Adam, myself, and a guest, if they're so inclined, bring to the table a good and a bad movie related to the topic. So in this case, each of us has a good movie to recommend and a bad one to steer you away from related to the career of Mr. Brad Pitt. And Adam, you're going first. What are your choices?
All right. So for my bad choice, I'll just get it out briefly. It was very much an Oscar baity film. A lot of people were excited about it. The trailer, like, what is this? This looks so bizarre. And then I watched it and I was incredibly bored. I don't like it. I don't like anything about it. I got the Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Some people, I'm sure it worked for them. It did not work for me on basically any level. I mean, the acting's fine, I guess, but just other than that, it just felt too over the top sappy. Not for me. And for my good, it's a movie I just recently finally watched. Thomas and I actually watched it together. I absolutely love it. I love the soundtrack. I love the way Brad Pitt looks. He's the only person who could pull off this look and make it like badass. I have Killing Me Softly. Love the movie. Love the script. Love the, sort of monologues that happen. Love the cast. I mean, other than Brad Pitt, Richard Jenkins and Gandolfini and just phenomenal cast. And I just think the movie works pretty much all around. Super fun, sort of, hitman movie.
Fun is not an adjective I'd use to describe Killing Them Softly.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe not fun.
It's not a rollicking fun time, necessarily, but it's a great movie. Yeah, like you mentioned, I watched it with you, and that movie, I remember, it was kind of infamous for, it did not do very well at the time, and it's one of the rare movies to get the F Cinema score, which, if you're unaware, Cinema Score is this company that basically takes the first reactions of people after seeing a movie, audiences initially coming out, and they grade and they average up, and this is one of the rare ones to get an F Cinema Score. I think mainly because it's kind of like what we talked about with Ad Astra. That movie was really advertised poorly as it's a gritty crime movie that really gets you immersed in what's going on, and really that movie, it's a very sad contemplative movie once again, but this time about sort of the anger that built up in sort of working class folks about politicians don't give a shit about us, and it's literally going on at the time of the first election of Barack Obama. It's 2008, and just that guy doesn't give a shit about us. And it's interesting, especially given what would happen 4 years after that movie. It feels oddly prescient in an upsetting way about that. But at the same time, it's a great little crime movie. It's a phenomenal, really skeezy performance from Pitt. And everyone else, Gandolfini in particular is phenomenal. One of his last performances, pretty stellar. And then Benjamin Button is one I have not seen since the theater. I don't remember really loving it at the time, just really being amazed by sort of the de-aging effects work to make Brad Pitt, old baby, eventually become dying baby by the end of it. I think some of those effects are interesting, and it's one I've wanted to revisit, nothing else because it's Fincher, and it feels so different from a lot of what Fincher does. But yeah, at the same time, it's not one that I would put high on his filmography for me.
I guarantee you that was the pitch for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button too. Brad Pitt, old baby, dead baby. Give me money.
Here's $100 million, Mr. Fincher. Do it.
Let's make this happen.
Well, I'll go ahead and go with my choices here then. For my good, I have one we've talked about this plenty of times on the show. Is my alternate choice, and it's Pitt as part of a big ensemble that includes some people he would have been in the Ocean's movies with before this, like George Clooney, but also Frances McDormand and a few others. I have Burn After Reading, which is the Coen brothers film from 2008. That was another one that, I remember it came out at the time, right after their win for No Country for Old Men. And a lot of people dismissed it as oh, it's whatever. It's not that great a Coen brothers movie, but I think it's sneakily one of their best movies. I think it's such an incredible, also very cynical movie about just oh yeah, a big CIA thing happens, a big kerfuffle, and it's in the hands of either morons who have no idea the actual stakes of this, because it's not really that high a stakes, a fucking CIA thing, or with people who are knowledgeable about the CIA but just don't give a shit. It's either just total apathy or total delusion about what's going on here. And I think it's so fucking funny. Particularly, Pitt in this movie plays himbo the best I maybe have ever seen it, because he is so dumb but in such a funny way, where particularly when he's trying to communicate with John Malkovich, be we haven't talked to you about the security of your shit. He's really fucking cool about it, but it's he's fucking up. Or even later on, you think it's a Schwinn when talking about his bike he drove over to the fucking meeting with John Malkovich with. There's so many funny, even his dance has been gift for a reason. It's such a fucking funny bit. And of course, without spoiling it, the end his character meets is one of the most darkly funny bits in the Coen brothers movie, which is saying a lot. But he's not only great, Clooney's great, Frances McDormand's great, Richard Jenkins pops up and he's always phenomenal. Malkovich is at his most unhinged and funny in that movie. Tilda Swinton pops up and she's stellar too. It's such a fun ensemble and a really, I think, underrated one in the Coen brothers filmography. But then my bad one is one that was really infamous mostly at the time, and I hadn't seen it until recently, but it was very infamous for the off-screen sort of stuff that was going on behind the scenes of this movie. I have Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which of course this was the movie that he teamed up with Angelina Jolie on, and was the tabloid hullabaloo about the fact that he was with Jennifer Aniston at that time, but he had sparked up an affair with Angelina Jolie and later divorced Jennifer Aniston and went off with Jolie after that movie happened. And I had not seen it before doing sort of prep for this show, And I can get kind of why that's the only reason anyone really remembers this movie, because it's a pretty like underwhelming sort of like action comedy from Doug Liman, who is one of those directors where it's like it's either great or shit.
I'll say
there's rarely a middle ground with that dude. And and you can tell that obviously there's a chemistry that's undeniable between those two. And if you know about the behind the scenes stuff, you can obviously tell why. So you can at least say that like they're like, you know, having some kind of fun together. There's a scene where they do a ballroom dance and are trying to like attack each other at the same time. That's pretty fun. But that's in a sea of like a bunch of other like very elaborate, very forced sort of like action comedy bits. And also Vince Vaughn may be at his most annoying as a side character, who's basically like a weird, like secret agent incel of some sort, who lives with his mom and just is talking all the time like, oh, women are terrible, they're the worst, and all this other stuff. Like, what the fuck is this character at all? Like, honestly, I would rather see the movie that's about their superiors, who like only appeared like in voiceover. It's Angela Bassett and Keith David are like their superiors that appear in like voiceover. I want that movie. Those two, that's a hot couple. I'm telling you, that would have been great.
That's like Cool World all over again. Like, can I follow that story instead?
Yes,
like,
right, exactly.
Clearly the better one. Burn After Reading is a hoot, and I don't say that lightly. His character, Brad Pitt's character in that is, I mean, and you quoted my favorite line. His delivery of that line is just dynamite. He's so weird. And kind of uncomfortable. That one is a lot of fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they are remaking that one. And I'm all for it, because I was really disappointed with that. Like I had a better movie in my head, I think, or at the very least a more ambitious movie in my head than the one I ultimately got. It just didn't go hard enough for me. I mean, elite killers going at each other. I mean, come on. That should have been like James Bond versus Alec Trevelyan, like GoldenEye levels of just tension there. And it always seemed more important to get the laugh than to do anything else in that movie. And I guess if that was the movie Doug Liman's trying to make, then I guess I can't be mad at him. I was hoping for something a little more exciting.
Yeah, it's the remake. It's the TV show, right, with like Donald Glover. And it was gonna be Phoebe Waller-Bridge,
which would have been awesome.
Left. Right, and now it's Maya Erskine, who I've seen in other things. She's a very good actress. I'm curious to see if she can, what she can do with that. But yeah, have you seen those two, Adam?
Yeah, definitely. Burn After Reading's it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. I love the ensemble. Pitt especially is just so funny, and yeah, he is the quintessential himbo. He's a fucking moron who just so simply got by because he's good looking and works at a gym. But yeah, he's an absolute idiot. And yes, his end bit is just hilarious. It's so fucking funny. And then Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I remember like the first time I saw it thinking to myself, oh, this isn't that bad. I mean, I saw it when it came out on DVD, and that's never a good sign. And if after you watch a movie, you go, you know what, this wasn't that bad, because it does have some fun bits, like the ballroom dance, and their initial first fight is kind of fun, especially with some of the needle drops that happen. But other than that, it's just a poorly constructed action comedy, and it doesn't lean hard enough into either one. Like, my thing is, if they were gonna be silly with it, just didn't make it really slapsticky. Then you go as goofy as you can with it, whilst being able to employ the services of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, or make it just straight up action and go hard, make it a hard R action movie. And they did neither, and we, the audience, are dumber for having watched it.
Well, now Mel, I'm curious, what are your choices for the double redo?
This was kind of tricky. For my bad, it was a toss-up for a little while, and I actually rewatched both of them to determine, because I hadn't seen either in such a long time, but to determine which was the bigger crime cinematically. I was going to go with Meet Joe Black, because I think that movie is just really, really weird and messy, and not intentionally. But ultimately, I was more entertained by the kind of foolishness that was going on in that movie than I was with my actual pick, which is The Devil's Own, starring Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford, where Brad Pitt is an IRA guy who comes to America to live with Harrison Ford, who is a police officer, who is the one nice, decent police officer on the force, which is horse shit, whatever. But that's neither here nor there. That's a conversation for another day. And he's here in America because he's trying to get money to buy Stinger missiles to take back to Ireland to fight the English. And here's the thing. That subject matter just is fascinating to me. It always has been. But that movie feeds it to you on like a 6th grade level. So it's very just kind of rudimentary. It's very top, like surface deep. It doesn't really do proper respect to the history of the conflict. And he's rocking an Irish accent. That's not great. Like the entire time. It's certainly not as good as his accent from Snatch, which is like the pinnacle of acting as far as I'm concerned. It never comes together. It's the most boring movie about a quote unquote terrorist living with a cop who are friends for an act and a half and then become enemies. And for my good one, I got to go with 12 Monkeys. That was one that was in that era where he put out like 3 fantastic movies back to back, and it turned me around on him. I mean, that movie does not treat mental illness very well, looking back on it, but he plays a young man in a mental institute, and that performance is so wild and so unhinged. But it's really great. That's just a great movie all around. Even though Terry Gilliam apparently turned into a psycho. That aside, it's just a wonderful time travel movie about a guy trying to release a disease that allows the animals to reclaim the earth, because all the humans who don't die are forced to live underground. And I love that in true Terry Gilliam fashion. Everything is hideous and it's all steampunky, and it's the future, but everything looks like it's 300 years old. And there's just people are drooling everywhere, and everyone's hair is questionable. It's fantastic, and he's such the standout in that. His performance just goes so hard every time he's on screen. He just owns.
Yeah, we've talked about 12 Monkeys on the show before in our Bruce Willis episode from earlier this year. But in terms of the pit of it all, that was so pinnacle for him, especially that got him his first Oscar nomination for supporting actor, and is an interesting performance given modern times for sure, but at the same time he's very committed to it, and it did show that they're like, oh, he's not a pretty boy, he's actually like a genuine actor who wants to like fully immerse himself in a role, no matter how bizarre and weird it is. Like the scene with him and Bruce Willis on the staircase is like one of the better examples, like the both of them at like sort of the height of their acting ability. And I have not seen your bad pick, though. I was looking at the poster and I realized like, oh, this is a movie that only exists as like a video store cover for me. Because I remember like I've seen that cover so many times, just like Brad Pitt in profile and half of Harrison Ford's face partially obfuscated by like blackness, and I'm like, yep, that's I know that poster very well. It just only exists as like this cover, just like, oh man, they're facing off against each other at an awkward angle. I wonder how that's gonna go.
That was that era, man. The mid to late 90s, when every movie poster was just a fucking huge head. Sometimes full moon, sometimes half moon, sometimes crescent. But yeah,
and it weirdly almost looks like the Face Off poster, which would have been that same year. It's just Pitt is like at the slightly different angle from it.
Yeah, I've seen both of these. I mean, yeah, like I said, we talked about 12 Monkeys. I love 12 Monkeys. I love the Brad Pitt of it all. I love that he's just spoiled rich fuck who's just got these crazy ideas to maybe distance himself from his dad, but also, daddy, pay attention to me. And then, yeah, Devil's Own, I saw a long time ago, probably right around when it came out. And I just remember thinking, like, what is, I can't, this accent, what is happening here? Like, I can't watch this. Like, what is going on? And yeah, I've never gone back to it because of that. And yeah, so yeah, fucking stupid. Brad Pitt, like, look, Yeah, Brad Pitt's accent in Snatch is good, and because it's so crazy and over the top. But Brad Pitt doing accents is not something that needs to happen.
He's a bit inconsistent with that, yeah, for sure. To say the least. But let's go ahead and repeat our titles for everybody out there.
For my good choice, I had Killing Me Softly, and my bad choice, I had The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
For my good, I had Burn After Reading, and my bad, I had Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
And for my good, I had 12 Monkeys. And for my bad, I had The Devil's Own. And a little bit of trivia, that's the only movie I ever walked out of in a movie theater.
Oh, wow. High esteem. But let's go ahead and start doing our exit for the show, though. Stay tuned. We'll be doing our picking for next week's episode at the end of this one. We want to thank some people first. We want to thank first Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for the artwork for our show. Follow him at Night of Water. That's night with a K _of _water on Twitter and other places to get more of his great stuff. And of course, thanks to our loyal supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you can become an Edgelord patron, and you get to listen to bonus podcasts we put out, like we would have put out recently, our top 10 aliens from movies and TV, where Adam and I count both of those down our own lists. And also, you get to vote in polls for individual movies we cover for an episode, or even topics for an entire episode. And around the time this episode's coming out, we'll have our poll for next month. We're doing Mafia movies. And so you all get to vote between my two good choices for that episode, which are between Jonathan Demme's Married to the Mob and A Bronx Tale. And I'll just say, A Bronx Tale I have not seen before. So I'm very curious to, if we get that, I've heard a lot of interesting things about that one.
Phenomenal movie.
It really is. It's fantastic. It has one of my single favorite scenes of anything in it, and you'll know it the second you see it.
Okay, well, that's not a ring endorsement. That's not a campaign slogan right there. Like, everybody, for y'all to vote. If once again you just become a patron at patreon.com/DETBpod. And of course, the big person we want to thank is our guest, Mel. Thank you so much for coming back. We love having you on the show. Please promote yourself, plug anything out there for people to follow you on the internet and such.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It is always such a pleasure to talk to both of you. You can follow me on Twitter at Tangent1985, as well as the YouTube channel of the same name, where we have not had a video up in a while, but the ones that are still there are awesome. I'm a freelance screenwriter in my spare time, so if you've got a movie you want made, hit me up.
Slide into them DMs for Mel.
That's right.
I'll gladly take them.
I'll take your money.
But for more of us and our Rinky Dink operation, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at DEDBpod. And also you can email us stuff like feedback or even double redo choices of your own for episodes over at our email, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And for more of me and my individual antics, find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at NotTheWho'sTommy. And I also do some writing on places like marianithomas.wordpress.com, my blog, and at film-cred.com.
And just don't look for me.
You want to be like Tommy Lee Jones?
Yeah.
You're on Neptune. You want anybody to come for you.
100%.
I never cared about you or your family.
Yeah.
I never cared about you edgelords. Doesn't matter.
I'm serious. I don't want him to look for me.
Okay, you don't want to promote any of the actual stuff. Okay, that's fine. But for more of us, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, why not listen to all the other great shows on there? And you can also dig into our archives and our Podbean main feed for several episodes we did before we joined Talk Film Society. And everything else, if you can't, support us on the Patreon, money can always be tight. It's totally cool. But what you can do to help us out for no money whatsoever is just to rate, review, or share the show around, because it gets us more visibility.
Yeah, you should.
Ring endorsement for Adam right there.
Yep.
But now, Adam, it's time we did our picking for next week's episode. And we do this, as I mentioned, at the end of our episode, we do our picking where Adam and I have either two good or two bad choices. We switch up on the quality for that. And we each have assigned them between 1 and 10 for those choices. And it's either one of us chooses, a number between 1 and 10 to get us close to whatever good or bad choice. Or if we have a guest, Mel will be doing that for this evening. And keep in mind, there is the Godfather rule, where Adam and I each have a single veto in our back pocket we got to use before May. And if we hear one of the choices where we'll say, Mel says, I'm going to pick number 7, One of us is like, okay, that's closest to number 8, which is this particular choice. The other person could be like, you know what? Don't want to cover that choice, and we'll say, actually, I'll take the cannoli. Unless that choice is gone, and we gotta go with other choice the other person has. And the topic that we'll be doing is an interesting one we've had on the back burner for quite a bit, and we're like, you know what, we didn't have anything to like tie into for this particular week, so let's have some fun with revenge films, which, you know, there's obviously like the sort of action thriller revenge movie that could fit into, but, you know, revenge is a dish not only best served cold, but in different manners, so it could be any wide variety. It's a very wide-ranging topic.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite subgenres too. I mean, when it's done right, there's kind of nothing better. You know, you get to see, you know, somebody who more than likely deserves it sort of get their comeuppance, and, you know, friends become friends, enemies become enemies. You know, it's just it's a really, really fun sort of subgenre.
But at the same time, we have to wonder, was it worth it?
Right? Yeah. I mean, it is. Revenge is always worth it, guys. Take out your revenge all the time.
Well, let's see, Adam, because you have the 2 good picks, I've got the 2 bad picks. So, Mel, first for Adam's 2 good choices, number between 1 and 10.
9.
All right, at number 10, which either way this would have gone, I'd have been happy, Thomas. I hope you are too. But at number 10, I have the Korean film I Saw the Devil.
Ah.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Definitely
gonna go with that one. Great fucking movie. Not taking the cannoli on that, for sure. Love that movie. Very glad to revisit that. What was your other choice?
Number 1, I have a movie that very recently came out. It's one that you actually saw in theater, and it took me a while to get to see it, but when I finally did, I kind of fell in love with it within the first 10 minutes of the movie. I have The Card Counter.
Oh, yeah. That's another fun romp of a movie right there.
Yeah,
Paul Schrader
sure.
and his wacky antics. That one's pretty great, but yeah, I'm still down for As the Devil. I also would have been good with either of those, though.
All right. Well, good, Dick.
Well, now let's see. My 2 bad choices, please, Mel. Pick a number between 1 and 10.
4.
Okay. Over at number 3, I had one from, we talked about her briefly in one of my bad choices, very much tangentially related to Mr. Pitt for quite a while. I have this movie that was a very big hit at the time, but I never liked it then, and I don't think I'll like it again now. I have the big action assassin movie, Wanted.
Oh, God.
Yeah. All right. You know, I remember actually when it came out thinking it was all right. I never loved it. I got a kick out of Morgan Freeman in it, swearing and stuff, which always makes me laugh. You know, shoot this motherfucker. You're like, yeah, but kill him, guys. But no, we'll see how it holds up. I'm not taking the cannoli on that one.
Well, on the other side, over at number 8, I had one that I would be curious to revisit anything else because I like most of this director's work, but I wasn't a huge fan of this one. I have Nicholas Winding Refn's Only God Forgives.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. You know, I don't even know if I ever even saw that.
I mean, I think that was another one that, people saw Drive. Drive was a weird hit. And everyone was like, oh, Nicholas Winding Refn, let's put another big one out for you. And it's just like, Ryan Gosling's there, but it's not a very commercial movie at all by any degree.
You want to talk about people walking out? That was one.
Yep, that was a big one. There's a lot of people who were not fans of that one. But yeah, so still, Wanted and I Saw the Devil. That'll be a lot of fun to talk about next time. But until then, everybody, just remember, you don't need your Neptune dad's approval to be loved.
I'll be your Neptune daddy.